The purpose of this account is purely for entertainment. The events in question occurred just over 2 months ago. I am 48 years of age and my wife is 45. We have 2 sons, aged 21 and 23, and our youngest is a 19-year-old. My daughter has consistently demonstrated a strong attachment to me throughout our family's lifespan. During her formative years, I indulged her by accommodating her requests and lavishing her with affection. This dynamic persisted until she reached adulthood. At that point, she began to express greater comfort discussing matters related to women with her mother. Despite this change, the bond between them grew stronger. I maintained a positive relationship with my daughter as she became closer to her mother. My role shifted. I became more of a father figure, responsible not only for her but also for her older brother. Her mother became her best friend and I took on the role of being the parent they needed. They provided each other with support in all aspects of their lives. My wife was grateful for the opportunity to live in the moment, engaging in discussions with our daughter about the characteristics of men she found attractive and potential romantic interests. These conversations were akin to those typically engaged in by teenage girls. Additionally, they were active on social media platforms, including Instagram and Facebook, sharing posts and engaging with content. From an early age, our daughter had a considerable following on Instagram. I was informed that this is a common occurrence among attractive women on social media platforms such as Instagram. However, I tend to adhere to a more traditional approach to social media, having never fully embraced the social media phenomenon. When my daughter reached the age of 17, I was taken aback to discover that my wife has been in a relationship since she was 15. She was aware of it from the outset and they discussed the challenges and rewards of teenage dating. My wife jokingly called me a dinosaur because I was unaware that this was a common occurrence for teenagers in the modern era. Over time, I came to accept it as part of teenage life. However, I was concerned that it might lead to conflict. There were conflicts between my wife, my daughter and me. However, I found it difficult to accept the idea of my daughter dating multiple boys at such a young age. This was a source of contention for me. My views were traditional in this regard. I believed that the typical path for a young woman involved dating during college with the intention of finding a life partner. Marriage and starting a family after college, as I had done with my wife, was the traditional path for young women in my generation. However, my wife had a different perspective. She believed that it was normal for young women nowadays to date multiple men at once and choose the right one. I did not agree with this approach and sometimes accused her of promoting such behavior. My wife consistently espoused our daughter's perspective on dating, which I found somewhat disconcerting. When our daughter reached the age of 18, she commenced a relationship with a gentleman who was 2 years her senior and already enrolled in higher education. Fortunately, he was pursuing a career path that aligned with mine. As I gained a deeper understanding of him, I was genuinely impressed by his character. This prompted me to began to reconsider my stance on the matter, realizing that my views may have been influenced by traditional values. It became evident that my daughter and wife's perspective on dating in the modern world was not entirely without merit. I decided to take a step back and observe how things naturally unfolded. Our daughter gradually began to include her boyfriend in our family activities, outings and outdoor adventures. He rapidly became an indispensable member of our family, and my sons also developed a strong affinity for him. He conducted himself with the utmost respect and made his genuine intentions towards my daughter crystal clear. His presence instilled hope in me because numerous individuals, including my wife, had previously informed me that traditional relationships it became evident that conventional dating practices were no longer the norm. This young man exhibited no interest in casual social gatherings or excessive alcohol consumption. His dedication to the relationship prompted the realization that he might hold a deeper affection for my daughter than she did for him. This was an acceptable outcome, as it aligned with my understanding of the evolving dynamics of relationships, including the one my wife and I had experienced in our early. The dynamic between the two was similar. It was encouraging to observe a young man who demonstrated a profound commitment to my daughter's well-being and the establishment of a loving relationship. This was particularly significant as my daughter was preparing to commence her studies at the university. My wife shared an intriguing insight with me: our daughter's intention to reside with her romantic partner on campus. She perceived this to be a logical decision. From a financial perspective, it would facilitate the transition, given that she was already acquainted with him, whereas I was more inclined to accept her boyfriend. However, I was of the opinion that it was vital for our daughter to develop independence and responsibility during her time at college. I was not at ease with the notion of a young woman residing with a man, particularly when they were not engaged or married. Given that she was engaged or married, I ensured that she moved into a dormitory rather than living with her boyfriend on campus. However, less than a year later, her boyfriend approached me with the intention of proposing to our daughter. Initially, I was hesitant, but I was impressed by him. This was the first occasion on which I had been made aware of developments in our daughter's relationship before I had been informed. I consulted with my wife and daughter. I chose to withhold my approval until I had discussed the matter with my wife, as I wished to avoid spoiling the surprise my daughter's boyfriend had planned to spring on me. My wife was wholly supportive and had only positive things to say about him. I also spoke with our daughter about her relationship. Despite my initial reticence, I was pleased to discover that my daughter shared her affection for her boyfriend and her desire to spend her life with him. Everything seemed to be falling into place, and I was proud of how it was all unfolding. A few days later, I gave my blessing for their engagement, and they decided to move in together. I was genuinely pleased for them because their relationship was strengthening with each passing day. He was a promising young man with a promising future, and it was logical that he wanted to commit to my daughter at an early stage. She had matured into a beautiful young woman, and I could not help but notice the attention she received from men as she continued to mature. One day, I overheard my wife on the phone with my daughter discussing another guy. This struck me as unusual, but I did not want to jump to conclusions. Perhaps I had misunderstood or had not heard the entire conversation. I therefore requested that my wife clarify the situation. I was keen to ascertain whether there were any underlying issues in their relationship. My wife was reassuring, stating that everything was fine. However, I was reluctant to accept her assurances without further evidence. Consequently, I pursued the matter with her, but she remained adamant that I must have misheard. A few days later, I discovered a piece of mail with an unfamiliar sender's name, which prompted me to investigate further. I found that it was from another man who had sent something to my daughter. She had it sent to our home to keep her fiancé. Upon questioning my wife about this other man, she finally confessed that our daughter was secretly dating another man. I was taken aback by this revelation because I had truly hoped things would work out between her and her fiancé. I attempted to console myself with the idea that life does not always proceed according to plan. Despite our best wishes, unexpected things occur. I came to realize that I was unable to control who she fell in love with, given that my daughter had been seeing this other man for several months. I assumed that she had broken given the proximity of my relationship with the fiancé and the gentlemanly conduct I had observed. I decided to contact him. My intention was to inquire about his well-being and to ascertain his perspective on the situation, even if the relationship had concluded. I reached out to him by telephone, but he seemed entirely unaware of the developments. He was undisturbed by the apparent issues in their relationship and was making plans for the future with my daughter. I was perplexed by this response and relieved that I had not inadvertently revealed any information during my conversation with him. I discussed the matter with my wife. It troubled me that he was the only one unaware of my daughter's relationship with another man. My wife believed that it was normal for a young woman in a relationship to have an affair, but I strongly disagreed. We argued heatedly about it, and the disagreement ultimately centered on the fact that my daughter was still young and exploring her identity, while I understood that aspect. I felt it would be fair to let the other man with whom she had a committed relationship should be aware of the situation rather than remaining uninformed and misleading the other party. At the time, I was uncertain about how to handle the situation and considered simply letting it resolve itself. My life was already demanding, and I was reluctant to become overly involved in my daughter's secret relationship and my wife's role in it. Several months later, my daughter's fiancé contacted me to express his concerns about their relationship. He mentioned that my daughter had been acting differently towards him, and I began to grasp the seriousness of the situation, yet I remained uncertain about the propriety of disclosing this information. This conversation left a profound impression on me, particularly when he described her partying and occasional absences. I was largely unaware of the other man's identity, and my wife was not inclined to provide information. This led me to concern myself with my daughter's safety. This concern prompted me to install a GPS tracker on her vehicle to monitor her whereabouts. I subsequently discovered that she was still meeting with him. Despite her regular attendance at school, my daughter was also frequently visiting a specific location where the other man was staying. When I raised this with my wife, I was expressing my concern that our daughter was spending time with another man while in a committed relationship. However, her main concern seemed to be that I had tracked our daughter, viewing it as an invasion of her privacy. She accused me of being controlling, which, in my view, was an unreasonable accusation. My concerns were centered on our daughter's safety. What if something happened to her? What if this other man posed a threat? These thoughts never seemed to cross my wife's mind. My wife's primary concern appeared to be the potential loss of our daughter's trust and the perception that I was more invested in our daughter's fiancé than in her autonomy. I attempted to clarify that my primary concern was the potential for violence if the fiancé were to discover the situation in an unfavorable manner. It would be preferable for our daughter to be transparent with him regarding her sentiments and the intricacies of their relationship. While I did favor her remaining with her fiancé, I was not entirely opposed to her forming her own romantic preferences. However, I could not condone her prolonging a promising relationship with a young man. He had done the right thing by disclosing his intentions to me. I felt that I would be betraying him if I allowed my daughter to continue this affair. It was evident that my wife was not treating this situation with the requisite seriousness, so I decided to have a discussion with my daughter about it. She informed me of her intention to maintain her relationship with her fiancé while also pursuing a connection with the other individual. I presented her with an ultimatum, urging her to be transparent with her fiancé about the nature of their relationship. I believed that establishing a relationship with this level of transparency was the optimal course of action. She countered that she argued that he would be heartbroken, and I countered that it was preferable for him to receive the truth directly from her rather than through another party. Following our discussion, she sought to persuade my wife to exclude me from her romantic life. I recognized her desire for privacy, but I was convinced that the situation could potentially become dangerous. I was aware that when circumstances took a turn for the worse, my daughter would turn to me, realizing that I was the only person who knew the truth about her relationship with her fiancé. I made the difficult decision to call him myself and inform him of the situation. It was a challenging conversation, and he was understandably devastated. I advised him to prioritize his well-being. I advised him to avoid any reckless actions and reminded him that he was still young. He eventually decided to terminate the relationship with my daughter, which resulted in her experiencing a profound emotional distress. Information about my actions was disseminated, and it was disheartening to observe that individuals were primarily concerned about the disclosure of information rather than the circumstances surrounding it. It prompts reflection on the societal context in which some individuals choose to lead lives characterized by infidelity and unfaithfulness within committed relationships. My wife's behavior has been characterized by a tendency towards deceit and dishonesty and a lack of consideration for the feelings of others. However, it is important to acknowledge that she also possesses a number of positive attributes. She is a devoted wife, who plays an active role in the running of the household and maintains a healthy level of intimacy within the relationship. She is also a caring individual, and we have a strong understanding of each other, which serves to reinforce the bond between us. In contrast, my daughter's former partner displayed a lack of integrity and respect, which ultimately led to the breakdown of their relationship. My fiancé was a friend to my sons, and this situation provided them with a valuable lesson about the importance of not staying in a relationship marked by infidelity. I have raised my boys with strong principles, and they understand the importance of honesty and loyalty. Currently, my wife is giving me the silent treatment, and my daughter has dropped out of college. She has chosen to return home from college in order to exact revenge on me. Despite my preference for her to remain in education, she frequently displays distress and raises her voice when I am present. My wife has also adopted a disapproving stance towards Nye, attributing the current difficulties to me. Despite the current situation, I am not overly concerned as I believe my daughter will eventually overcome it. She has been posting subtle negative comments about me on her social media accounts, but I am not letting it affect me. I plan to have a conversation with her when she stops. The situation presents an opportunity to impart important life lessons. It is noteworthy that the engagement was terminated just 9 weeks ago, and the emotional wounds are still quite fresh. There has been criticism of my actions, with some suggesting that I do not care about my daughter's well-being. Nevertheless, I must respectfully disagree with this assessment. There are several reasons why I believe I am genuinely concerned about her well-being. I am unaware of the identity of this other individual, as he has not engaged with my daughter's parents, which raises concerns about his intentions for my daughter. Secondly, given that my daughter is young and attractive, it is likely that she could find another suitable partner if necessary. Finally, it is important to teach her that promiscuous behavior, which my wife appeared to encourage from her early teens, is not the appropriate path. My wife's behavior may indicate a certain inclination towards promiscuity. Although I do not believe that she is engaging in an extramarital affair, I do perceive her to exhibit certain childish tendencies and a proclivity for behaving in a manner that is characteristic of a younger individual. These observations have prompted me to intervene and provide guidance to my daughter in order to ensure her well-being and facilitate her growth. In the second account, I recently became aware of my wife's infidelity. This has left me feeling uncertain about the appropriate course of action. My wife and I have been together for nearly a decade, and we have been married for 5 years. We have 2 daughters, aged 5 and 7, whom we adore. My wife and I have been married for 5 years and have 2 daughters, aged 5 and 7. My wife is an engineer and is therefore able to remain at home and not work. We live in a spacious 6-bedroom house with a backyard and a swing set. In addition to our immediate family, my wife's mother, who is 15 years old, also lives with us. My elderly sister has been residing with us for over 2 years, and I have been providing her with financial assistance over the past few years. My wife and I have been experiencing significant challenges, leading to a deterioration in our relationship. I could discern the potential for this to occur, and thus encouraged my wife to participate in marriage counseling. We have been attending sessions nearly every week since April. Neither of us was truly happy, and counseling made me realize the destructive patterns in our behaviors. I was actively working on becoming a better husband and father, and I believed my wife was doing the same. In October, I had to go on a business trip for a few weeks, and a friend tipped me off that my wife was spending a lot of time with a specific guy I had briefly met. I had previously encountered this individual, who I was informed was a friend of my wife's. This was sufficient to prompt my suspicions, leading me to immediately book a flight back home. Upon my return, I observed that my wife's demeanor was noticeably distant and unenthusiastic. I had not discussed my suspicions with her, only informing her that I had missed her. Once we arrived back at our residence, she proceeded directly to bed. I remained awake for a period of time and, upon determining that she was asleep, I accessed her mobile phone. It is noteworthy that a potential indicator of infidelity is when a spouse begins to keep their phone with them at all times, even during periods of sleep or when showering. I was able to ascertain the name of the individual in question and perused their text messages. She was the primary caretaker for the children. I examined her mobile phone records and observed that she was sending over 20 text messages to him on a daily basis. I roused her from slumber and inquired for an explanation. She denied any wrongdoing, asserting that they were merely friends and that she had deleted the messages because she anticipated my suspicions would be aroused. As my concerns continued to intensify, I began closely monitoring her mobile phone records. The situation became untenable for me, and I informed her that she needed to cease all communication with him. I even confronted the gentleman in a cordial manner at his residence and requested that he terminate his interactions with my wife. He consented to do so. However, my wife began harboring resentment towards me due to her perception that I had abruptly ended a harmless friendship she had with him. Nevertheless, she did appear to cease texting and communicating with him. The man in question, nevertheless, I observed a sudden surge in her data usage, particularly through Facebook Messenger. She began to keep her phone even closer and repeatedly denied any communication with the man. I began to feel paranoid and decided to put it behind me, focusing on becoming a better husband and father. I started to be more attentive, helping more with I became more involved in the children's daily activities, reducing my concerns about money and minor issues. I also began doing my own laundry and assisting the children with their homework. I made an effort to be part of what mattered to her and supported her passion for horses. A few years ago, I even purchased a horse for her and helped her find a job in the equestrian industry, allowing her to have more self. On the 15th of January, we are attending a celebratory dinner for her brother's birthday. Her cousin and friends are also in attendance and we have a pleasant meal afterwards. The majority of people, including her, proceed to the bar next door. I remained at the restaurant with one of her cousins when the manager approached me with her phone, inquiring if I knew who it belonged to. It transpired that it was my wife's phone. Upon opening her Facebook app, I discovered a series of messages between them. She articulated her affection for him and expressed a longing to be reunited with him. She also referred to him as her one and only. The messages continued to deteriorate, and I reached my limit. Her cousin also reviewed the messages and expressed shock. After a thorough examination of the messages, she informed me that she had developed feelings for him but denied any intimate involvement. She maintains that the number of kisses was limited to 2. I express my skepticism and inform her that I am unable to accept her statements at face value. I am convinced that there was no physical intimacy between them, but I do not disclose this information to her. She elaborates that she was involved with him due to my lack of attention and the years of neglect she endured. I am overwhelmed by a sense of disillusionment, anger, and foolishness simultaneously. I am reluctant to pursue a divorce, yet I am also uncertain about the future of our marriage. She states that I am not loved by her. She says that she wants to work through this, but I am unsure of my own desires. It seems as though she is seeking to establish her own identity and prove that she does not require my presence. I love her, and it is challenging to maintain a negative emotional state, but I believe that perhaps she will learn to appreciate what she is by losing it or at least a portion of it. What should I do? Edit. Thank you for all of the advice. This has been extremely helpful for me. I simply wanted to provide an update. I have consulted with a lawyer who provided invaluable counsel at the time. I was residing with a friend, but he advised me to return to my state of origin. There is an abandonment clause in the relevant legislation, which could result in my being held legally responsible for the well-being of my former partner and children should I fail to maintain contact. Consequently, I have returned to my family home, where I am currently residing in the basement. Additionally, the lawyer suggested that I might have sufficient evidence to prove that my former partner had committed adultery. This could potentially exempt me from paying alimony and child support, although it would not extend to any further financial obligations. He also advised against maintaining any close relations with her, as this could be perceived as condoning the affair and undermining my case for adultery. Additionally, he informed me that he typically advises his female clients to attempt to reconnect with their husbands in instances where they have been unfaithful. Finally, I have taken measures to safeguard my assets. This includes opening a new checking account in my name and changing. I have also initiated the transfer of my salary to a new account. I have taken significant steps to safeguard my financial interests. I have terminated all shared credit cards and have engaged the services of a fraud monitoring agency for our credit. Furthermore, I have made the challenging decision to sever ties with my mother and sister. Last week, I consulted with a real estate agent and have scheduled the sale of my house for next month. I have informed the relevant parties that they will require alternative accommodation once the house is sold. Furthermore, my wife has secured employment with her uncle's moving company, despite the relatively low remuneration. This may assist her in appreciating the value of hard work. I have also made it clear that I will no longer be responsible for the boarding or other expenses associated with her horse. Additionally, I have cancelled her gas card, given the high cost of refueling her Lexus X470. With regard to our children, I am striving to shield them from the conflict. I avoid engaging in conflictual interactions with my children in their presence and ensure their basic needs are met. The positive outcome of this situation is that I have come to recognize that the responsibility for the situation does not lie with me, and I am committed to addressing the issues at hand. 8 months later, I have made significant progress in my emotional recovery. I have experienced a range of emotions, including periods of severe depression, but I have been able to overcome these challenges. I have had to confront and process a considerable amount of pain and anger initially. My intention was to make my wife feel the consequences of her actions, and we agreed on a monthly child support amount that was higher than what the law required. I considered this to be the appropriate course of action at the time. My lawyer drafted the settlement agreement, and all that was required of us was to sign it, thereby acknowledging our respective obligations. Every month, my wife found a house to rent. The property was situated approximately 45 minutes from the city, which seemed an appropriate distance for our daughters to reside in, given the proximity to excellent schools. I was aware that the landlord could not afford to offer such a high standard of accommodation closer to the city centre and therefore considered it to be a suitable choice. Part of the settlement agreement included a clause stating that neither party could allow someone of the opposite sex to spend the night in the presence of the children. This meant that neither of us could have boyfriends or girlfriends staying over when the children were with us. The aforementioned provision is relatively common and adheres to the regulations set forth by our state. However, within the initial week of her relocation to the new residence and prior to the formalization of the agreement, she permitted her new romantic partner to visit on several occasions each week. What exacerbated my frustration was her attempt to persuade the children to conceal this arrangement. I promptly instructed my legal counsel to revoke the settlement proposal and informed her that the revised arrangement would be for me to provide. The financial provision was limited to the mandatory child support required by the state, and no additional funds were provided. It took some time for her to understand the implications of her actions, and as a result, she is currently experiencing financial difficulties. It should be noted that I ensure the children have access to all the necessary resources, including food, clothing, and toys. However, I handle these expenses directly and do not provide her with any financial assistance. Despite her claims of actively seeking employment, she has not yet secured a job. In my view, this is a personal issue for her to address. I have recently embarked on a new fitness regimen, namely CrossFit, which has had a profound impact on my life. I am now in the best shape of my life, experiencing a renewed sense of well-being and confidence. In terms of my personal life, I have recently encountered an individual who has captured my attention. She embodies many qualities that are diametrically opposed to those of my former partner. She is highly intelligent, remarkably successful, and possesses a striking combination of beauty, ambition, and compatibility. I am approaching this new relationship with a sense of cautious optimism. I have made it clear from the outset that I am not seeking to rush into another romantic involvement. She fully comprehends our circumstances and is amenable to them. Meeting this new acquaintance signified a pivotal moment for me. I had a confidant with whom I could converse, associate, and feel secure. This individual bolstered my mood and altered my general demeanor. I was gradually reclaiming my joy and, since that time, circumstances have only improved. I was able to relinquish a considerable amount of resentment I had toward my former partner. Interestingly, we have developed a cordial relationship. We communicate regularly and always prioritize the children. I will never forget what she did to me, and although I may despise her, she is still the mother of my children. Therefore, it is in everyone's best interest that we have a civil relationship. We are not getting back together. I can never and will never trust her again. However, we can be friends and maintain a cordial relationship. Some things, however, I will never be able to forgive. The individual in question is undoubtedly one of them, as I informed her that I will never accept him or even acknowledge his existence. It would be optimal, particularly for him, if I never saw him again. There is more to the story, should anyone be interested. I shared this latest update because someone was curious about how things were progressing. I would also like to express my gratitude to everyone here who provided me with such valuable advice and support.